What is going on, Stack in the Box? My name is Mike Luciano of the Jet Press. I am joined this week by Jerry Trotta of the Landry Hat. Make sure to go and check out both of those sites and subscribe to the Jet Press podcast. But the main item on the agenda is recapping all of Week 9, a week that was admittedly a little bit of a slog sometimes. There were some hard-to-watch games for rookie quarterbacks, but there were some real diamonds in there, fantastic games buried amid all the 2 interception, 3-point performances that we saw from some of the worst teams in the league. So, Jerry, how are we feeling about Week 9? Mr. Cowboys coming just short of a crazy upset.
Yeah, had a chance to steal that one thanks to the Eagles' little miscues down the stretch there. But Week 9 was entertaining. Some of the highly anticipated games didn't really deliver, but as you said, some of the lower profile games were really entertaining.
One of the ones I thought actually did deliver, despite the score line, brings me to my one big takeaway this week, and that is Buffalo-Cincinnati. Buffalo now is not only not in the playoffs, if the season ended right now, they are 5-4 and third in the AFC East, which who could have thought that? Number one before the season with Aaron Rodgers. Number two, after Aaron Rodgers goes down, that's where the Bills, who again don't really have a defensive coordinator either, Sean McDermott's doing both that and head coaching. It's a little bit more of a mess than you'd think. What this game crystallized, because I know crystallized that Joe Burrow is obviously back and playing very well, and he's continued his solid performances or his run of solid performances against good AFC teams. He's now 5-1, I believe, against Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, which is an amazing feat in and of itself. But I think this really showed me that I think the Bills have peaked with this whole Josh Allen, Sean McDermott, and kind of how the general offense is constructed roster. I thought really 2020, 2021, even 2022, those were the peak. That was kind of it. I think if you were going to get Patrick Mahomes and you were going to go make a Super Bowl run, I feel like that was the time, especially before Allen had that big contract. So now what you have now is year 5 of they can't get a running back who can run the ball. It's year 5. They haven't invested in it. They haven't drafted well. Just can't do it. In the multiple offensive coordinators, Brian Daboll, Ken Dorsey, can't do it. They can't get a quality number 2 receiver. It's Stephon Diggs or nothing. They draft Dalton Kincaid. Now Dawson Knox, who Allen has a comfort with, he can't really play as much. Kincaid is in. They're trying to shoehorn both of them in. Nothing's really working. The defense was one of the best in the league a couple of years ago. Now because of injuries and guys leaving, it's just fallen off. Unless Josh Allen just goes superhero crazy mode, which he does a lot and he's done before this season, if he doesn't do that, it's really tough to see Buffalo winning a lot of these games, especially in tough environments against the best in the AFC.
Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like I agree with you when you say that the Bills might have reached their ceiling in 2020 when they lost to the Chiefs in that overtime thriller. But yeah, it's hard to envision the Bills making a deep run this year. If Josh Allen isn't doing everything and then some, it's hard to see like how they score points, and the injuries to Matt Milano, Tre'Davious White are crushing to say the least. I think they had one of the NFL's best defenses before those injuries, and it's all come crashing down after that. But yeah, their offense is one-dimensional. It's kind of Stephon Diggs or bust, like you said. Dalton Kincaid's putting up some nice numbers, but Gabe Davis still hasn't emerged as that number 2 option. He'll make some splash plays here and there. Khalil Shakir will burst on the scene every now and then, but yeah, you have to wonder what the Bills' ceiling is this year.
Low key, if you look at the numbers, they are not a good drafting team. Like they hit on Allen, and then Brandon Beane made a good trade for Diggs with some of his picks. They do not draft well generally. They can't get a running back. They can't get another receiver. Obviously, Milano and White were big hits. They're both hurt. That obviously takes a big chunk out of your defense. But then they also draft Kyer Elam to be the number 2. They don't even play him.
Yep.
It's a really kind of a rinky-dink operation they got going on out there. Outside of so much in this league can be covered over if you get a quarterback. They got Allen. He's covering up for it, but when you get to the playoffs and it's Mahomes and Burrow, and I think Lamar Jackson's finally got back on track, and I think Baltimore, as we'll talk about later, is as tough an out as you're going to find in this league right now. What is there outside of Allen? Let's just say Josh Allen starts playing a little bit hurt. Maybe he's a little limited. Like, how are they going to beat teams? if you can lock down Diggs, hard as it may be, if you can do that, some teams have done it. It's really tough to see this offense getting any sort of flow. And the defense, who admittedly have been through a lot, that's a banged up unit. They're not stopping anybody. Like, I'm always afraid of the Bills because they can just bury people and just blow them out so easily when they click. But when they don't click, as they do a lot against these elite teams, it looks ugly.
Yeah, totally. And like you said, with Diggs, if you throw some bracket coverage his way and make Josh Allen try to find Gabe Davis, Khalil Shakir, and his other weapons, they're just not explosive, And the running game, James Cook is a nice player. He's nice in space, but I don't know if he's like the between the tackles guy you want. They have Latavius Murray. I think they just signed Leonard Fournette to the practice squad. We'll see if he gets activated here in these next couple weeks. But yeah, I'm worried about the Bills. They could find themselves out of the playoff picture entirely in a couple weeks if they don't be careful.
Now, the other big game that happened was a little bit earlier for us over on the East Coast. We had to get up at 9 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday and sit through Chiefs-Dolphins, which I thought was going to be an aerial circus. And here we are on a 21-14 AFC North black and blue slugfest. You had your eye on this game in particular, Jerry.
I did have my eye, and I had my eye on the Dolphins offense again, which struggled. I guess it's more of a testament to the Chiefs defense, which might be the best in the NFL. If not, it's right up there with the Ravens and Browns for sure.
And not everybody can be Zach Wilson against it, though. I'm just saying you look at the numbers, he's maybe played the best against it, which is kind of crazy.
That is a crazy spin on it. But Tua Tagovailoa, I struggle with him sometimes when he's not targeting his first read, which he does more than any quarterback in the NFL. And he does it at a high level. I think his EPA per play is the highest of any quarterback when he's throwing to his first read. But when he's not, we see him struggle with accuracy. I think he had a miscommunication with Cedric Wilson on the final play when the game was on the line. And conversely, it was funny how the Tyreek Hill trade came full circle with the Trent McDuffie pick, who they used that pick on Trent McDuffie. He strips Tyreek Hill, and the fumble ends up being the game-winning touchdown for the Dolphins. But as we sit here today, I think we still have the same concerns about the Chiefs offense. It kind of sputtered there in the second half. I don't think they scored. Did they score a point in the second half?
Don't think they may have. Maybe they got one touchdown.
One touchdown, yeah, but it didn't look great. So, and I guess that's a credit to the Dolphins defense as well, which has looked better since Jalen Ramsey's come back. But yeah, the Dolphins are 0-3 versus teams with a winning record this year. They kind of beat up on the scrubs, and they can't get past the heavyweights. I think that'll be a narrative until it isn't, right?
I mean, it certainly has to be. And this game's less about the Chiefs for me because, I mean, you may have Patrick Mahomes and he can cover up for pretty much any fault that you have, but there is some sort of limit. Like when Rashee Rice and Marquez Valdez-Scantling are your top targets in a Matt Nagy offense, your top wide receiver targets, like it's hard to really generate anything. You're not getting anything open deep down the field. They're obviously putting an inordinate amount of attention on Travis Kelce, so you're letting just a bunch of little sisters of a poor trying to get open and do something, and it's not really working. If the guys aren't open, you can't throw the ball to a guy who's not open. So I sympathize with Mahomes in that regard. But with Miami, too, when I keep watching Tua against good teams, because he's 0-3 against teams that winning records, even though one of them is Buffalo, who I have my doubts about, it reminds me of the last couple years of Jared Goff with the Rams when it went bad. Because Jared Goff earlier with McVay was obviously cooking, but at the end, it just seemed like if everything was set up perfectly, drop back, clean pocket, wait for 2 seconds, find an open guy, hit him. Very few guys in the league can execute it as well as Tua. Like, he's still leading the league in touchdown passes. I have my doubts about him as a quarterback, but he's still producing. Then when things go sideways, when there's pressure, when Tyreek Hill, because now every defense is just immediately, how do we take Tyreek Hill out, especially with how often Jalen Waddle gets banged up. Because losing Jalen Waddle, you now lose probably the two fastest guys in the league. Once there's some attention on Hill, once the line starts breaking down, then you have to see Tua for kind of what he is. And even Tua supporters will tell you the arm strength is not that great. The throwing off platform, I think, could probably be a little bit better. And then sometimes he can just get overwhelmed mentally in terms of trying to locate guys when they're open. For as small as he is, he's not like a crazy athlete. I know he had the hip injuries at Alabama, and he was a much better, I think, runner and player on the move before all the hip problems started coming up. But there are some problems with this Dolphins offense. Now, it helps that you have Mike McDaniel, who's as creative as anybody in the league in terms of just X's and O's drawing up plays. He's like a math teacher. Like, he calculated to a percent the most ideal way for a guy to get open. And that can work against teams that just don't have the personnel or the know-how or whatever it may be. But when you go up against teams like Kansas City, who've been there before, who have seen Tyreek Hill and know him as well as anybody, this is where the imperfections of Tua start to come out.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like the secret is kind of out on how to slow down this Dolphins offense. Like, either get pressure on Tua or force him to hold on to the ball longer than 2 seconds. Like, make him come off that first read. I think the Chiefs forced him to hold on to the ball for almost 2.6 seconds yesterday. It was the second longest of the season, and the results kind of speak for themselves.
And I believe the Eagles are up there too. Eagles did a pretty good job for all their faults, I think, on the defense of limiting Tua. So now into the stock report, where we see who is thriving after week 9 and who is crying. Does that rhyme, thriving and crying? It rhymes for the purposes of this segment.
Absolutely.
If you say T-Pain rhyme mansion in Wisconsin, anything's possible. So moving into stock up, this is the obvious one, but it needs to be said. I mean, CJ Stroud with the best game a rookie quarterback has ever played in NFL history, and I don't think you can argue that. 470 yards and 5 touchdowns is one thing, but 470 yards and 5 touchdowns while leading a second-half comeback against a team who scored 37 points in Tampa Bay. I mean, what more can you ask of a guy in what was his 8th NFL start? I'm so happy for CJ Stroud because every year there's one guy, I get maybe it's prospect fatigue where guys are the number one for so long and they start trying to poke little holes in their game. That's kind of happening now with Caleb Williams and Drake May. It certainly, I think, happened with Stroud. But all the unnecessary crap he got in the pre-draft process, that stupid S2 test, which I think immediately has now been proven bullshit.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, if Stroud was not good at it and he's been this amazing and allegedly Bryce Young was better at it, and then we'll get to Bryce Young a little bit later, I'm so happy that CJ Stroud's doing this. He only has 1 interception on the season, and the funny part about that is the interception right after the guy picked it off, he fumbled the ball, and the Texans got it right back immediately. So Stroud's doing amazing. DeMeco Ryans has built an extremely efficient system. Bobby Slowick, the offensive coordinator, is doing a great job. He's got 3, I think, totally legitimate receivers too.
Oh, yeah.
Nico Collins, Tank Dell, Robert Woods. You got a veteran, you got a deep threat, you get a speed guy who's slanting stuff inside. They're very complimentary. The Texans, I don't think, are going to make the playoffs this year, but if you're a Texans fan, looking at what you got your coach, you get your scheme, you get your offensive star Stroud, and your defensive star Will Anderson. I mean, that's half the rebuild process done right there. Rare shout out to Nick Caserio because I have my problems with him, but he nailed it this offseason.
Oh, yeah, he crushed it. And, yeah, I can't be happy for CJ Stroud. And he took some stock, too, for just being an Ohio State quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was somehow made a narrative leading up to the draft because some Ohio State quarterbacks haven't really panned out, especially ones that were drafted anyway. But, like Joe Burrow, he started his career at Ohio State, and he's turned out just fine.
But yeah, Texas Tech guys are great before Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
Got the player, not the logo.
It's crazy. But, yeah, I'm thrilled for CJ Stroud, and the AFC South too is kind of on the come up, I would say. Some nice young quarterbacks scattered throughout the division. You got CJ Stroud. Will Levis is kind of looks like a player for the Titans if they can continue building around him. Obviously, Anthony Richardson, we saw what he could do before his unfortunate shoulder injury, and Trevor Lawrence is obviously an established top quarterback. So, yeah, I'm excited to see what the Texans accomplish from here on out. And CJ Stroud, I kind of wonder if he'll start getting some MVP chatter in the coming weeks if he continues a similar level of play, right?
I mean, there's really no runaway guy. I mean, the odds makers say Mahomes, but I mean, Mahomes is playing his worst year in a while. It was Josh Allen was one of the favorites like 2 weeks ago, and now here we are in this ever-shifting race. If he throws 1 interception for the rest of the year, you at least got a very Dak rookie year. Didn't Dak have like 3 in his rookie year or something like that?
Yeah, the number, very low number. And Yeah, very, very low number. I think 3 at the most, I would say.
Something like that. So moving on to Dak Prescott's team, I'll let Jerry take the reins here, the Cowboys guy, because, I mean, there were a lot of positives to take away from the Cowboys. Like, it hurts to lose to the Eagles, obviously, but you could also frame it as we lost by 5 on the road to the best team in the conference, literally by a couple of yards. So if you frame it like that, it doesn't sound bad, but Jalen Hurts was just opening up a can of whoop ass on this Cowboys defense, this once vaunted Cowboys defense.
Yeah, once vaunted is the perfect way to put it. And granted, they came through with 3 straight 3-and-outs towards the end of the game, but Jalen Hurts led drives, long touchdown drives in the second half that really put the Cowboys in a precarious spot. You know, you never want to have to come from behind against the Eagles in Philly. And granted, they almost pulled it off, but Jalen Hurts clearly banged up from his knee injury. I think they're calling it a bone bruise on his knee, but he came up hobbled after a Michael Parsons sack. And a couple of plays later threw a dime from 30 yards out to Devonta Smith in the end zone. He couldn't have walked it to him any better. I continue to be so impressed by Jalen Hurts. Obviously, he has all the physical intangibles, the mental intangibles, but he's come a long way as a passer. He did fumble the ball early in the game. He was lucky enough to recover it. The turnovers will be an issue come playoff time, but if the Eagles have Hurts healthy, I don't see how they're not considered the favorites to win the Super Bowl. I think that their offensive firepower is what separates them from the Chiefs, in my opinion.
Well, they're at least the favorites to get out of the NFC after how bad the NFC looks. It's always funny watching Hurts. Like, we talk about which quarterbacks have the best traits all the time. For some reason, and certain quarterbacks will throw, I think, the best routes. For some reason, go balls down the sidelines. Has Jalen Hurts ever like overthrown a guy? Like, every time it's 40 yards to AJ Brown, just right down the sideline, it's right in the guy's hands. It's kind of funny to watch.
Yeah, it's crazy, and yeah, he gets a lot of stick for his throwing mechanics, his accuracy, whatever. But like, he's just a really good quarterback, and the Eagles are in great hands.
Ball gets there. I mean, Phillip Rivers had the worst mechanics you'll ever see in your entire life. Ball got to where it needed to go. Poor Phillip Rivers. I loved Phillip Rivers so much when he was playing, and then he had the one good team he had, he blew out his ACL in the playoffs. I'm like, this poor guy, and then there was that one year where I think he had the best offense and best defense in the league, and they still missed the playoffs. I'm like, oh, you poor guy.
And he was the best of the quarterbacks the Colts recycled through after Andrew Luck retired.
He was, and I think statistically, come at me all you want, he was the best of the 04 quarterbacks. It's just they landed in solid gold organizations, Steelers, Giants, and he gets the Chargers, who we'll discuss a little later. But a guy who is hoped to put up Phillip Rivers-like numbers and is certainly not putting up Phillip Rivers-like numbers right now is Bryce Young. And I've excused a lot of Bryce Young's issues because, number one, I think they look worse than they are because of the comparisons to him and Stroud, with Stroud being so good early on. They're obviously going to make every mistake look worse. But Carolina has a regressing offensive line. Ike Mekwonu looks like benchable. I'm shocked. Evan Neal was bad all the time. Mekwonu was at least good last year. I don't know what happened with that. He's got an outdated old head coach with no juice in Frank Reich. He's got the worst receiving core in the league. Adam Thielen, stop yourself. Adam Thielen, okay, yeah, sure. That's a good lead receiver in 2023. Adam Thielen, woo. I'm really quaking in my boots. He's got a first-time offensive coordinator in Thomas Brown, who's very respected, but still first time. He's still blurring things up. They just switched over play calls. Miles Sanders has been a disappointment. So I get all that. And then I'm watching the Colts, and then not only is Bryce Young averaging 5.5 yards per attempt this year, and I believe since 2000 has the worst yards per completion of any quarterback, but he throws 3 interceptions. Not the end of the world. Rookies do that. 2 pick sixes, and they were both just really, really bad throws where he threw it right to the guy. One was a really bad overthrow. One looked like a screen that got blown up. I'm like, oh, he is trying way too hard. And I'd like Carolina to get him some players. Unfortunately, their best asset to get players is their top draft pick, who they gave up last year to get Bryce Young, and their best skill position player that they've had in years was DJ Moore, who they also gave up to get Bryce Young. So I think setting him up to fail is a little too strong here, but they certainly are not doing him any favors because their offense literally, this is a true statement in the year 2023. If Adam Thielen does not get open, the offense doesn't work. That's the dire straits that Carolina is in right now.
Yeah, pretty much. Who's even their second leading receiver behind Thielen?
Is it DJ Chark?
It might
No, because
be.
he's been hurt. It's gonna be it probably is DJ Chark. Oh no, you know who it is? It's I think it was one of the oh no, it is DJ Chark.
Is it DJ Chark?
And then he went 17 catches. And then
17.
Jonathan Mingo has 200 yards. He's a second-round rookie. And then Hayden Hurst right behind him. So, yeah, this is Stone Age football we're watching.
Yeah, because does Terrace Marshall even play?
They tried to give him a shot, and he stunk. I think he has 1 touchdown in 3 years. So, I mean, if he's not the savior. I remember the Jets were thinking about trading for him, and everybody was like, can we not do that? Because he can't play for the Panthers, so why would he play for the Jets?
Yeah, totally. And getting back to Bryce Young, I feel like it's hard to evaluate him this year because of all of the reasons you said. They try to sign Miles Sanders, or they did sign Miles Sanders, and it hasn't really panned out. I think Chuba Hubbard has been a superior back this year. Sanders has kind of dealt with injuries. But yeah, anytime Adam Thielen is your leading receiver in the year 2023,
by a lot too,
it's not even close. Yeah, you're not putting your young quarterback in a position to succeed. And while Bryce Young has certain factors working against them, I think it'd be wise to just give him the year to try to work out the kinks, get accustomed to the speed of the NFL, the speed of defenses, and try to reassess where he is in year 2, because the Panthers are arguably the worst team in the NFL, and it goes far beyond Bryce Young.
I just find it weird that they trade up. I know he's as small as he is, but they get the run around and make plays out of the pocket down the field guy, and then they just have him do dropbacks and do drags all day. Like it's the wrong thing. It's that old meme where there's like a Ferrari and like just a guy's driveway with like a tin roof above it. Like that's kind of what they're doing. They live in Clovis, New Mexico on a farm, and they bought a Maserati. That's not what you get a Maserati for.
Yeah, you're not accentuating what he does best. What's the point at that point, you know?
Well, again, David Tepper is the most as impulsive an owner as you're going to get. And whatever reports come out, you cannot convince me that someone on that staff didn't want Stroud, and Tepper said, no, we're taking Bryce. Just I can't get that out of my head. It's true until I'm proven 100% wrong, because it just doesn't make sense.
Totally.
Vikings Falcons, the Josh Dobbs game, as Josh Dobbs, after showing up on the team like 2 days beforehand, scores 3 touchdowns in a road win against a good defense. And I think, as you'll say, that's a big indictment on Arthur Smith.
Yeah, I wonder how soon until the heat gets turned up on Arthur Smith. Like, how many more losses do the Falcons have to suffer? Because I know
the Falcons fans are ready to ship him back to FedEx right now.
Yeah, you beat me to it. Yeah, Arthur Smith. I mean, there's just no excuse for losing that game. And I know Josh Dobbs is a baller, and we'll get to him in a minute. But you allow the Vikings to erase an 8-point deficit midway through the third quarter. I don't know, like his play calling in the red zone. Bijan Robinson fumbled. I guess that put him in the doghouse. But on 3 straight plays in the red zone, you don't have Bijan Robinson on the field, who you invested the number 8 overall pick in. I feel like Arthur Smith thinks he's kind of gives off the vibes of a person who thinks he's smarter than everybody else, and as that so often happens in that scenario, like it doesn't end up working out. And I wonder if maybe he'll like resign at the end of the season because of like the sheer negative feedback he's receiving. But Falcons fans are not in his good graces right now.
Well, he's certainly richer than everybody else, given where he comes from. His dad, I believe, is the founder or CEO of FedEx or something like that. But the thing I don't like about Arthur Smith is I get people were complaining about the Lions not using Jahmyr Gibbs, like fantasy people. And then my reaction has always been, well, who cares? They're winning. So, like, it's obviously working. I get that he has quarterback issues, 100% valid. But number one, he had Matt Ryan, chose to not continue with Matt Ryan, so he bears the blame for that. And then he invests 3 straight top 10 picks in a running back, a tight end, a receiver. And it's not only is he not getting him the ball, but like he's getting tight ends the ball, but it's Jonnu Smith. He's getting receivers the ball, but it's Kadero Hodge, not Drake
Matt
London.
Collins.
And he's still splitting carries with Tyler Algier. Like, if you're winning, I'll let you cut you some slack. Belichick did that all the time where he would bury guys on the depth chart. He went 12-4 every year. Nobody cared. When you're losing games in the most winnable division in the league, and you have these 3 top 10 picks, none of whom are, I mean, like Bijan's obviously playing well when he gets the ball, and I think Drake London's playing well, but they don't have the numbers to show it. When they're not getting that production, it mystifies you.
It really does. Like, well, I feel like watching the Falcons offense, like it's frustrating, because there's so much talent and it never comes off. It's not explosive. And I know Desmond Ridder is to blame for some of that early in the season, especially with his turnovers. And I don't think Heineke looked terrible yesterday, but I just continue to be let down by Arthur Smith's play calling.
Arthur Smith, I think he risks becoming a Josh McDaniels, which is a good transition to the next segment. Raiders-Giants, in a game that showed, in a league where everybody wants to hire the 38-year-old offensive coordinator as a head coach because he knew Kyle Shanahan or Sean McVay, there's just something to be said for a guy who everybody loves and respects and does not think is a titanic asshole like the Raiders thought Josh McDaniels was, confirming all those reports. Like, and you don't want to see anybody lose their job. I've been critical of Josh McDaniels. You don't want to see anybody lose their job, but you also don't want to see a guy be this bad and then be arrogant about it and then ruin the mood of 53 other guys who are trying to win. You don't want to see that either. Antonio Pierce comes in. Granted, he was playing a game on easy mode because he's playing Daniel Jones number 1. Daniel Jones, unfortunately, torn ACL. Very sad there. We don't know what his future is going to be. But then he gets Tommy DeVito of Don Bosco Prep up in North Jersey. I mean, in his first real extended action where they actually let him throw the ball, that's not hard for a defensive coach in Antonio Pierce. But you could just sense that something changed with the Raiders. Like, I don't know how far they'll go. They still have a rookie quarterback in Aiden O'Connell now that Jimmy Garoppolo got benched. But this looks like a real team that's motivated and is playing hard and has a style, which under Josh McDaniels, they were the least fun team in the league. It's the Raiders. They're like the badass outlaw team. And they were the least fun, bored team in the league under McDaniels. So immediately, I think Antonio Pierce has changed the culture.
Yeah, totally. And I think the switch up from Jimmy Garoppolo helps too. I think every time you can throw a young quarterback into a young quarterback into that kind of situation, I feel like it brings up the whole morale of the team. And you can just see that Devontae Adams wasn't thrilled with Jimmy Garoppolo, and it all stems back to Josh McDaniels. And it's kind of crazy to think where does McDaniels rank among the worst head coaching hires of all time? Not even just hires, just head coaches of all time.
He's up there. I mean, Bill Peterson went 1-20. I don't think he's that bad, but I mean, he's going to have a better record than some of the quote unquote worst coaches. Because again, sometimes the worst coaches would get fired after a year or two, so they didn't really get a big body of work. But in terms of guys who have coached for as long as he has, I mean, maybe Gus Bradley was worse, but even then, Gus Bradley was a nice guy who got stuck with a bunch of horrible teams, and he just never elevated them. Gus Bradley at least seems like a nice guy. McDaniels does not. So that makes it even worse. Like, everything compounds on it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just crazy how, the day after he was fired, you saw all, the locker room, they had a basketball hoop going. Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs were seen celebrating. It's a wild look for McDaniels. And I kind of wonder if he'll get another offensive coordinator job again, because everywhere he goes, it seems like maybe he ends up back under Bill Belichick, depending how long Belichick lasts in New England. That offense certainly hasn't impressed this season, but I wonder if people will look at the 2023 Raiders and use that as possible trepidation when they go to hire McDaniels as their offensive coordinator.
He got 3 head coach, because remember, he had the Colts one too, and then he left the Colts. That's the funniest part too, is McDaniels, I don't even think is the best coach in his own family anymore, because his brother, Ben McDaniels, is the passing game coordinator for the Texans. So right now, I feel bad for Ben because he might be doing a good job, and I don't think he's going to get hired because they're like, "Oh, are we just hiring Josh McDaniels again?" He's like, "No, I'm good." My brother, it's like a Derek Carr thing. Like, "No, I'm good." David Carr was the problem. I feel bad for the guy.
Yeah,
Moving
me
on
too.
to a game that I thought was going to be one of the games of the week, and was this just a butt kicking on every front. That Ravens defense, as Jerry will allude to, they are a bunch of guys who are all playing at their peak right now. I mean, this is a ferocious unit.
Yeah, and to piggyback off McDaniels, who might struggle to get another offensive coordinator job, Mike McDonald, he might be the biggest name on the next head coaching carousel. I would be stunned if he didn't get a job. I would personally love him on the Cowboys if they were to let go of Mike McCarthy. I know Dan Quinn's kind of waiting in the reins there, but yeah, this Ravens defense, I think it's solidified now as probably the best in the NFL. Like right up there with the Browns. I don't know, like the numbers are probably give and take, but yeah, I saw a stat that they're allowing a touchdown on 8.7% of opposing drives, which is the lowest percentage since the 2000 Ravens, which is right up there for one of the best defenses of all time. And they're doing it without a ton of star power too. Like,
well, Roquan Smith is like the exception. Like, he's the big leader, but there's not Ed Reed, Ray Lewis on every single level.
Exactly. Yeah. Roquan Smith, Marlon Humphrey. They're just doing it with a lot of very good players. 2 weeks in a row now, they've held the Seahawks and Lions to their worst offensive outputs of the year. I mean, if the defense is going to play like this and Lamar Jackson is going to take care of the ball and they can run the ball at the efficiency they're running with it, I mean, I don't know how you can't look at the Ravens as probably the biggest threat to the Chiefs in the AFC, maybe right up there with the Bengals.
I'm a little upset that we don't get to see Ravens Chiefs in the regular season, because the Ravens, I think, didn't win the division last year, so they don't get the Chiefs based on that. But I'm just looking at their schedule too. They get Burrow again, they get Justin Herbert again, they get Trevor Lawrence, and then they get the Niners offense, which for all of Brock Purdy's problems is still pretty good. And then they get Tua. So they're really going to be tested, because they did well against Jared Goff. They did well against Geno Smith, who I think has 7 picks in his last 4 games. He's really fallen back to earth. The most points they've given up this year was 24. That was Burrow, but also hurt Burrow.
Mm-hmm.
And then CJ Stroud, first start, but apparently look how good Stroud is, 9 points. So I just love watching this defense, because if I was a coach, this is how I would build a defense. Like, just get a bunch of crazy fast guys and have them run around and hit people hard. It's kind of fun to watch.
It's very fun to watch. Kyle Hamilton's kind of developing into a nice player there. Marcus Williams is a good signing. The league leader in interceptions. I'm blanking on his name right now, but yeah, yes,
Geno Stone. I think he was a 7th round pick too.
7th round pick. Yeah. Then speaking of teams who I know we touched on, the Bills not drafting well. The Ravens are maybe the gold standard in drafting. They just continue to hit home runs pick after pick,
except wide receivers, but
except wide receivers. Yeah, I kind of feel bad for Lamar. He's still throwing Odell Beckham and Rashad Bateman.
Nelson Aguilar.
Nelson
Again,
Aguilar.
it's 2020. We're doing this with Thielen. Nelson Aguilar in the year 2023. But there were a couple games that I honestly think don't really, as we move into rapid reactions, there were a couple games that I don't think elicited a ton of strong emotions, like Packers-Rams. Not much to say. Beating up on Brett Rippon. What else you going to say about that? And Browns-Cardinals with Clayton Tune. That poor guy just getting eviscerated against the worst defense in the league on the road. I don't know what they were thinking making this his first start. I don't know why they didn't do this earlier with Dobbs, because the poor kid just got embarrassed. One game I do have some stuff to say about is Commanders-Patriots, because it's time to hand out an award, and it is the most confusing player at any position I've ever seen in the NFL award, and that's Sam Howell. I'm counting him as a rookie quarterback. Last year, he won game. Like, young quarterbacks, they're inconsistent. That's their hallmark. That's nothing like this. There'll be games where we'll get sacked 10 times, and you're like, man, we're just counting down the days until Ron Rivera gets fired and they can get a quote-unquote proper quarterback in, maybe a first-rounder, since Howell was a 5th-round pick. And then he does last week and this week, where they're throwing the ball 50 times, and he's getting the ball out, and Terry McLaurin's feasting, and there's some really accurate throws. and then he'll throw the worst pick ever, like he did against the Patriots.
Yep.
It just, I really don't know what to make of Sam Howell or really the Commanders, because it seemed like everything was doom and gloom and Ron Rivera's gone and total rebuild. And then you look up and they're one game out of a playoff spot. Them and the Falcons are at 4-5, and then the Vikings at 5-4 have one of them. Who knows if they're gonna keep holding up as Josh Dobbs goes into further into the year. Commanders are puzzling, but I love watching them.
Yeah, I totally agree. And does Sam Howell remind you of like a rookie Josh Allen in any way?
He reminds me, not just because of his size and kind of how he looks, of like young Baker Mayfield. Like with the Hugh Jackson Browns, like where he'll just rip some crazy 60-yard throw and then he'll get panicked, and then while falling away, he'll just float it up 10 yards, and you're like, what the hell's going on there? Now, Baker, I think, obviously, is probably going to be better than Sam Howell, and I think he got screwed at the end with the Browns, but I feel like I'm watching like Baker Mayfield light with Sam Howell.
Yeah, he's definitely he's exciting if nothing else, like his touch on his deep balls, it's so pretty, like, and it's fun that he's finally getting Terry McLaurin involved. I feel like McLaurin really wasn't a focal point of the offense, strangely enough, for the first month. McLaurin's starting to come on. Jahan Dotson's like weirdly starting to emerge too. He was silent for a while, and I feel like Eric Bieniemy is just cooking up some nice things over there, and he's accentuating what Howell does best. And while Howell will take some sacks, I feel like it's just part of the learning process. Like, it's his first year as a starter. He's showing all the potential. I feel like the Commanders might have a guy in Sam Howell.
Certainly can't rule it out, especially with I don't want to say quarterback play is necessarily bad in the NFL right now, like some people are. I do think that the lower end of it, compared to the last couple of years, is looking worse. Like, in a past couple of years, you've maybe had, I don't know, 19 or 20 quarterbacks where you're like, okay, they can at least, maneuver an offense and I can watch a game and it'll look nice. Now there's maybe like 15. And I think that's where the issue lies. Saints Bears, the Tyson Bagent Express might be running out of steam just a little bit. I think he's still going to be a good backup for like 5-6 years. He made himself a lot of money in this stretch, but obviously I think New Orleans is the big takeaway. They're now in first place in the NFC South, for whatever that's worth, because they got Bryce Young and Baker Mayfield and not a lot of and the Taylor Heineke experience in Atlanta going on. So it's not exactly murderer's row out there, but the Saints could have easily just thrown their hands up and said, all right, this is a lost season, because Derek Carr was struggling. It looked like Dennis Allen was on the super duper mega hot seat. It looked like nothing was going right. And then they get a couple nice wins. We get Carr looking like the player he was at his best in Oakland and Las Vegas. If Derek Carr puts together, I think, a traditional Raiders-y season, now that he has a defense, and now that I think he has, for the most part, better skill position players than he had with the Raiders up until like his last year, the Saints, I think, are going to get a home playoff game. And honestly, I mean, Jerry is a Cowboys guy. If you're like the Cowboys or the Seahawks and they end up getting one of the top 2 wildcard spots, if you go into New Orleans, are you feeling super confident?
No. I mean, who wants to go to New Orleans on wildcard weekend? Like,
well, people want to go to New Orleans in general, but like, don't want to play the Saints.
Yeah, exactly. Who wants to play the Saints in New Orleans on wildcard weekend? Yeah, that stadium's always rocking. They have a good defense, and yeah, if Derek Carr, I think he's obviously the key. Yeah, quarterback's the key. Like, great analysis, but like if he takes care of the ball, and finds Chris Olave, Raheem Shaheed, and Michael Thomas, the Saints could be a very tough out if they just have to hold on to the division. Like, they're susceptible to an F game every now and then, as we saw early in the season, but they could be a scary first round matchup for the number 1 wildcard team, who might end up being the Cowboys or the Seahawks.
Saints got 8 games left. It's Vikings, Falcons, both on the road, but still Vikings, Falcons, Lions at home. That'll be tough. Carolina, the Giants, the Rams, Tampa, Atlanta again. That's a soft schedule, man. I don't know.
If they don't win the NFC South, then we might have a bigger conversation at hand after the season.
Might be the end of Dennis Allen, for being honest. But so that was week 9, and we got 1 game left, and it is between my New York Jets, who have caused a great deal of, let's say, uncertainty and strife at times, despite their 4-3 record against the Los Angeles Chargers. And I've discussed this in the past on the Jet Press podcast and other places, but I'm a little nervous about this game for two reasons, because I think this is entirely going to be a Justin Herbert versus the defense of the Jets is going to decide this game. I'm nervous for two reasons. Number one, per Robert Saleh's own admission, they have embarrassed all the elite quarterbacks they played, minus Dak. Dak got him, but Jalen Hurts, 3 interceptions. Josh Allen, 3 interceptions. Patrick Mahomes, 2, should have been 3 if that one. Remember there was a penalty and the guy threw it like after the play was over. I'm like, oh, come on. But they have played well against elite quarterbacks. But those are all guys that love going downfield and love using their arm to take chances. Justin Herbert has that arm, but I think to a fault sometimes can be conservative and go, all right, I'll keep taking the checkdowns. I'll go 6 of 7 for 40 yards on this drive. We'll just keep the ball moving. That can be a defeatist strategy a lot. It can be an ineffective strategy a lot, but that's how the Jets, if you want to beat the Jets defense, that's how you have to play. That's how Dak beat them. It was like, 31 of 38 or something crazy like that? Like, that's how you got to play if you want to beat them. And I feel like eventually one of the elite quarterbacks is going to get him. Like, they can't force 3 picks against all the great ones, can they? And Herbert, even though he's got some receivers that are hurt, Josh Palmer being hurt, Mike Williams being hurt, he's got as much talent as anybody they got left on the schedule. So why can't it be him?
Yeah, why can't it be him? Obviously the key will be Sauce Gardner versus Keenan Allen. I don't know. I struggle to see how the Chargers move the ball downfield if Keenan Allen isn't open. Like you said, I know Josh Palmer's hurt. They're obviously without Mike Williams. Who do they have behind Keenan Allen? Did they activate Jalen Guyton off injured reserve?
Guyton's active. Quentin Johnston, but I mean, that's not saying much. It's probably going to be an Eckler-heavy game, but again, Eckler lives on those little checkdowns for 2 or 3 yards. That's how they can get him involved. And the Jets' run defense is okay. It's just a lot worse than the pass defense, and if you get a good enough running back, you can do some things against them. So I feel like Eckler, too, is going to have a huge say in how this game ends up.
Yeah, definitely. I would imagine Kellen Moore figures to use a lot of Eckler tonight. But I don't know. I kind of see the Jets defense stepping up to the challenge tonight. What about you?
They'll get him a little bit just because they're going to have one of the best number 2 corners in the league in DJ Reed, mostly on guys like Quentin Johnson and Jalen Guyton. And even though the Jets don't shadow a ton, they mostly just stick guys on one side of the field. I'd imagine there's going to be a lot of Keenan Allen versus Sauce. And Keenan will get his catches, but you got to account for the Sauce Gardner factor. The thing I'm afraid of, too, though, is if this does end up being a shootout, I really don't know which Chargers defense I'm getting, because there's been the Chargers defense where they've locked in, granted, against Tyson Bagent and Aiden O'Connell, not, Joe Montana and Steve Young or Ken Stabler, to use a Raider for that analogy. They're not locking in against guys like that. But when they do, tons of pressures. Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack coming off the edge against a Jets offensive line that calling it patchwork would be a very generous term, because Mekhi Becton is there. Laken Tomlinson is playing hurt. He was on the injury report all week. Joe Tippmann is playing a week after sustaining an injury some people thought would end his season, and now he's back. Then they got Xavier Newman-Johnson, who was a practice squad guy, and Max Mitchell, who stunk in the preseason. So this is not the Great Wall of Dallas. This is not an elite offensive line. That's what I'm mostly worried about. Like, the defense will get theirs, but you get that offensive line, you get Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack, and then you get Zach Wilson, who, if you keep him in the pocket, it's very Tua-esque, even though Tua is 10 times better. Everything's on schedule. Bang, ball comes out. He can throw it really well. I've never seen a quarterback. There's been worse quarterbacks in the NFL than Zach Wilson. I've never seen anybody get spooked like him. He hears any sort of pressure. He's running around and scrambling and rolling backwards and flipping it, and you're like, it's maddening. It's crazy how many times, I'm sure you've done it. You've watched Zach Wilson, and you're just like, no, as he's circling back. I can't imagine what Robert Saleh's thinking.
Oh yeah, and you see some of Salah's reactions on the sideline. They're priceless.
He despises him, which
But
I
he'll
mean, he
defend him at
benched him
every.
earlier and he thought he was going to get Aaron Rodgers, and now he's going to do this again. So I'd be mad at him too.
Yeah, absolutely, and Zach Wilson will be the key. It's weird. The Chargers pass rush, they generated pressure on Dak Prescott, but Prescott is a quarterback who is like highly efficient when pressured, and obviously Zach Wilson is when he abandons the pocket and goes off script, you never know what's going to happen. He could throw a dime 30 yards downfield to Garrett Wilson, or he'll throw a pass in a double coverage that'll get picked off. So
mostly the second one. It's mostly that. I think there's been like one or two of the first one in his 3-year career.
Yeah, and usually Garrett Wilson will have to bail him out, as we saw against the Bills in that Week 1 game. But yeah, I'm interested to see how Zach Wilson performs. I know he's kind of crashed back down to earth after he outperformed Patrick Mahomes on Sunday Night Football. This is a good opportunity, I think, to get Breece Hall involved. I know the Chargers will probably stack the box, as most teams do against the Jets, but correct me if I'm wrong. I think the Chargers have a pretty soft run defense.
It's better than they were, but it's one of those things where I think they were like dead last in the league by a lot when Brandon Staley first came in, and they've made some improvements, but it's not totally fixed yet. I think the interiors had some injuries. They got a rookie in Tuli Pelotu, I think, has been very good, but he's still a rookie. And then Kenneth Murray's gotten a lot better, which has helped. But I think structurally, I don't know if Mr. Special Boy Genius Brandon Staley is totally solved all the issues.
Yeah, I don't think he solved many issues, honestly, over his couple of years with the Chargers.
It's just crazy to me. This guy literally in like 2016 was a defensive coordinator at a D3 school. And then in like 5 or 6 years, he's a head coach of Justin Herbert. Like I've never seen anybody shoot upward like that. It's ridiculous.
It's crazy. And it's crazy because like he was so like widely beloved, like around the NFL, like fans, like because of his like analytical approach, like going for it on 4th downs, and that flamed out so quick. Because like if you're calling it and it works, you look like a genius. If you don't and it hurts your team, you're an idiot. But yeah, I don't know what to expect from this game tonight. Honestly, I really don't.
It's like everything. It's tough to just project the Jets win. That's why I've been so hesitant to do it. Because I can't confidently say, oh, yeah, Zach Wilson's going to outplay Justin Herbert. Like, you don't feel right saying that as an analyst or anything like that, because you're like, well, Justin Herbert is 10 times better than Zach Wilson will ever be in his entire career. So they have just such an immense edge in that area. But this is the thing with the Jets. This is why they are where they are, and kind of why the Steelers are where they are, I think, a little bit too, because they have to win a certain sort of way. Pretty much every other, except for Herbert and the offensive line. I think the Chargers, although they're banged up on the offensive line, I think have a better line than the Jets. Outside of that, Hall and Eckler are comparable. I think Garrett Wilson and Keenan Allen kind of cancel each other out, and then another banged up receiving core, so that kind of cancels each other out. And then the defense for the Jets is miles better. And I think just 1-53, the roster is better for the Jets. So that's what makes this game so hard, because I could just say, well, the Jets have the advantage in so many places, but maybe the defense will just give up and Justin Herbert will throw for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. Maybe this will be the week it caves in. That's where I'm having all this hesitation.
Yeah, I think it's justified hesitation. Like, could this be the week that Zach Wilson like turns back into a pumpkin? I know he's avoided the backbreaking turnover for the most part. He's like, will that happen tonight? You know,
that's the thing with Wilson. Like I think this has pretty much been confirmed by a lot of the Jets, is he's so scared of turning the ball, which again, Robert Saleh, defensive coach, don't turn the ball over, play conservative. I get all that, but there are times, Kansas City game, where they just say, F it, let it rip, and he's really good.
Let it rip, yeah.
I've used this analogy before, because really the only thing that I like about him as a quarterback is the arm talent. Well, if he just does screens, what good's the arm talent? Tommy DeVito can do that. Like, you got to actually use the arm a little bit. But again, they're coordinated by a complete dullard in Nathaniel Hackett, who's only on the team because of Aaron Rodgers. Like, he's been. If you haven't watched the Jets this year, or Stacking the Box listeners, if you haven't watched the Jets a lot this year, Nathaniel Hackett's as bad as you remember. In terms, not even necessarily the play design. He's had some mistakes there, but the personnel stubbornness. Randall Cobb is still their number 3 receiver. Randall Cobb has 3 catches this year. His drop rate is 40%. Like, I didn't even think you could get that high. And he's still playing him out there. And then, of course, he had the famous excuse of, this is back when they had Mecole Hardman. Well, why isn't Mecole Hardman playing more? Why isn't Xavier Gibson, who's an undrafted rookie that they like a lot? He's the guy who ran the punt back. Why aren't they playing more? And he gave an answer where he said something to the effect of, we're not converting enough third down, so we can't get guys in. Have you ever heard a coach use lack of conversions as a reason to not play a guy? Like, it doesn't even make sense when you hear it.
Maybe playing new guys will help
the Jets. That's who we got to put our trust in.
It's crazy.
It just doesn't make sense. Predictions, though. I think we're getting on prediction time. So what do you think is going to happen?
All right. So obviously, we know the Chargers tend to play up or down to their competition, usually down. So I'm expecting a close game. Chargers in prime time. Like, what else? The script kind of writes itself, but I'm projecting a Jets win. I'm going to go 24-21 Jets.
I might go 21-16 Jets, just because you have a Jets team that every game they've played, except for Dallas, where just everything blew up, has been really close, mostly through their own poor offense, but still close. And then you have the Chargers, who will do the same exact thing. Just instead of it being 16-10 all game, it'll be 34-31.
Yep.
So you have these 2 cursed, snake-bitten, crazy franchises just ready to butt heads again. And honestly, I'm only really picking the Jets because I'm hoping maybe there's going to be like a pick 6 or something like that. It seems very Chargers to have happen. It seems like the Jets, I think they're going to get at least 1 turnover. I think that's a pretty fair prediction to make. But if it's like a shootout and the Jets kind of lean on Zach Wilson to go blow for blow, I don't really see him winning here. So I think we're going to call time on the Stack in the Box podcast. Thank you for joining me this week, Jerry Trott. As always, you can subscribe on YouTube at Stack in the Box, and you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, wherever it may be you get your podcast. We are on all those sites. Make sure you hit the subscribe button on YouTube and leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Any final thoughts, Jerry?
Thank you for having me on, Mike. It was a pleasure. Week 9 was fun. Week 9 was fun. Let's hope for more of the same week 10 moving forward. And good luck to your Jets.
I've tried to have hope in Zach Wilson before, and it hasn't really gotten me too far. So thank you guys for tuning in, and we will see you guys next Monday.